Now let's bring in Republican Senator James Lankford, a member of the Senate Homeland Security Committee. Good morning, Senator.
Good morning to you.
I know you worked with the White House and other senators to formulate this new proposal, but Democrats are already calling the president's pitch a non-starter. So are we back to square one? You just heard Senator Gillibrand there.
I certainly hope we're not back to square one on this. The problem that we've had for the past 30 days has been everyone's been staring at everyone playing politics instead of policy. Politics is a lot easier than policy on this, and what we've got to do is get a proposal on the table. What I encourage the White House to do, and multiple others encourage the White House to do, is put out a proposal. They've listened to a lot of Democrat and Republican members for the last month. They've heard all the demands. They know all the background on it. Put out a straw man proposal. Get something out there the president can say, I could support this, and it has elements from both sides. Put it on the table, then open it up for debate. The vote this week in the Senate is not to pass the bill. It is to open up and say, can we debate this? Can we amend it? Can we make changes? Let's find a way to be able to get the government open, because there are elements in this that are clearly elements that have been supported by Democrats strongly in the past, like the Bridge Act, like trying to get asylum to those in Central America rather than having to travel all the way to the United States, humanitarian relief.
Well, the Democrats say it's a non-starter because the deal doesn't go far enough in offering permanent protection for Dreamers. Should that be on the table, or is the 3-year extension the final GOP offer?
So what's in, and I can't speak for the White House and where they are on things, but what's interesting to me is the president is saying, okay, let's take the DACA issue. Let's give them 3 years for the first time ever, legislative approval, because DACA, as you know, has been a administrative approval. So let's actually put it through the Congress, have legislative approval, and let's take it past the next presidential election. And so this can be determined. It's no longer the quote unquote leverage point dealing with the kids in DACA. Also did the same thing for those in temporary protected status from El Salvador and Honduras. And that's hundreds of thousands of people that would get an extension of what they already have. So it is a big deal to be able to put out there. The conversation about what happened last February, saying that there was a full-on DACA for individuals to be able to get citizenship for a wall. Actually, that was $25 billion in total border security for long-term protections for those that are in DACA. The president still said we can talk about that another time, but let's get the government open. Let's not wait this out. Let's get the government open, get what we can get resolved.
I want your reaction to the president's tweet, which I read to Senator Gillibrand, putting amnesty on the table, saying amnesty will be used only on a much bigger deal, whether on immigration or something else. Likewise, no big push to remove the 11 million plus people. What's your reaction to that?
It is interesting. I don't know what the president's calling amnesty in this, if he's talking about for the adults. Much of the conversation about Dreamers has really not been about the kids that came across. It's been about their families, whether that be their parents, whether that be siblings, other folks as well. Most of the Dreamer conversation is a citizenship for Dreamers and for everyone else in their family as well. So very often a Dreamer conversation is about not 1 million or 2 million, it's about 12 million people. So what I don't know is what the president's talking about there to say amnesty really involves a much larger group. That's a longer debate and obviously not something we can solve quickly. The best thing that we can do is solve the few elements where we do have common ground on, get those resolved, get the government back open so people are actually getting checks again. This is absurd to keep this dragging on this long. So solve a few issues, but not try to solve a bunch of issues at this time.
Well, and to that point of reopening the government, Speaker Pelosi released a statement saying the president should, quote, stop holding the American people hostage with this senseless shutdown. Each day he prolongs this needless crisis. Coast Guardsmen, FBI agents, Border Patrol officers, TSA agents, and hundreds of thousands more workers are forced to live without knowing how they can feed their families or pay their bills. So why not reopen the government while negotiating on the border wall for Dreamer protections?
Well, if there's any two people that I say they're not in a motion to say, trust me, it is Speaker Pelosi and the president. They're not looking at each other, and neither one of them is trusting the other one. The best thing that we can do is resolve what we can resolve. So for Speaker Pelosi to say, trust me, President, open the government, and then I'll negotiate, the president clearly responded, no, I don't trust you right now, as she doesn't trust him. So let's do what we can, get it in writing, get it passed, and get it resolved. And some of these issues are really odd. For instance, the fencing issue that Speaker Pelosi has called immoral. President Clinton built fencing. President H.W. Bush built fencing. President George W. Bush built fencing. President Obama built fencing. This has not been an immoral issue, and the president's been very clear. He's talking about 234 miles of fencing along a 2,000-mile border. It's only in the priority areas. The majority of the issues will be done by technology and the normal areas that we handle border security. So this has become highly politicized, but when you look at the actual facts on the ground, you see this is something that should and could be resolved, and in the past just hasn't been a partisan issue.
Of course, he did say Mexico would pay for that wall. Just last year, the president appeared open to a similar deal to protect Dreamers, only to pull his support after coming under fire from conservatives like Rush Limbaugh and Ann Coulter. And after the president's remarks yesterday, Ann Coulter tweeted, "Trump proposes amnesty. We voted for Trump and got Jeb." Are you confident GOP support is there for a plan among Trump's base and among conservatives in the House?
Well, I think the president's put a reasonable compromise on the table. Everyone knew if we're going to go through this process, we're going to end up compromising on multiple different areas to be able to resolve it. But the core elements are there that we all strongly believe about. That is, how do you secure the actual border? The Dreamers, these DACA kids, we know this element, this group of folks. They have all gone through background checks. They're involved in our system right now. They're in our schools. They're in our workplaces. This is a group of students and young adults that we all know as a nation that live down the street from us, go to church with us. So for this group of individuals, I just don't see an issue with that, and I don't see that being amnesty. This has been a long-term issue for us as a nation that I think can be resolved.
And Senator, I want to end here by showing you a video that's gone viral this weekend. Teenage Trump supporters taunting a Native American veteran at the end of the Indigenous Peoples March here in Washington. Your state has one of the highest Native American populations. What's your message to those teenagers? And has the president created this environment, doing things like calling Elizabeth Warren Pocahontas?
Well, I would say a couple of things about the video. One is obviously that young man standing awkwardly close to someone. That doesn't seem natural to be able to have that. I don't see him taunting him. I see him just standing there staring at him. I would say there are a lot of rallies that I've seen.
You don't think that would be intimidating to have that teenager up?
Well, certainly I do. No. Certainly I do. And I wasn't trying to say that. I was saying that is intimidating. He's standing awkwardly close to him. But I've seen lots of rallies and events where I've seen individuals yelling and screaming in people's faces and trying to be able to intimidate them. So I've seen a lot worse than that. That is highly disrespectful, not only to a Native American gentleman, but any older gentleman for a teenager to do that. The key issue that I would say is in our culture, for whatever reason, in our current culture, whether it's on social media, whether it's at events, I see people trying to stop hate with more hate. That doesn't help us as a culture. If there's anything we should have learned from Martin Luther King Jr. is hate doesn't drive out hate. Only love drives out hate. So for us to be able to respond back with love and compassion to people rather than trying to drive out hatred with more hatred would certainly help us in our social media culture. And with the dialogue that's happening, it would certainly help us at events and to be able to have more open dialogue. And even things like this conversation about border security and where we are in government shutdown, to be able to continue to drive up the rhetoric doesn't help us. To be able to actually have floor debate, which is the request now. How do we actually get things on the floor?
Okay, Senator, I'm gonna have to stop you there, and we'll see what happens this week. Thanks so very much for joining us. Up next, House Home